Shabbat Shalom. Happy Sabbath. This morning we are indeed thankful that we're in the presence of Yah. And so we would like to look at the subject this morning, the presumption of divine injunction. The presumption of divine injunction. Now, we know that an injunction really is a judicial order that restrains a person from commencing or continuing an action, telling them to stop and desist from what you're doing. Stopping another person from invading another person's rights. That's what an injunction basically is. And the presumption is when you presume something to be that may not be correct. Let me explain what I mean. The word in the book of Hosea tells us that a child is born to Gomer. Gomer is Hosea's wife. He's a priest. And it is reasonable to assume that the child is Hosea's child because he's living with her as man and wife. But we learn by way of the child is named that the child doesn't belong to Hosea. The child is named Lo-Ami, meaning not mine. And so we learn that Gomer, who is married to the priest Hosea, leaves the family home, goes back to her old lovers in Jerusalem, gets pregnant, having had 2 children earlier, but this last child, Lo-Ami, is not mine. And Yah uses that marriage situation between Gomer and Hosea to illustrate the relationship that he has with Israel. Now, when I speak of Israel, I'm really not talking about geographical Israel. I'm talking about the Israel of Yah that is found in Galatians 6 and verse 16, meaning those who have been baptized in the name of Yeshua and accept him as their personal savior. In so doing, they have placed their souls in safekeeping and are the heirs of the kingdom that we spoke about this morning. That's what I mean by Israel. He who is a Jew outwardly, the same is not a Jew. And so we're dealing with that kind of Israel. So we see that Gomer has a child with the priest, and everyone assumed the child is his. And so that is a kind of a periscope that we want to use to look through our subject today, which is the presumption of divine injunction. So turn with me in your Bibles to the book of Bereshit. That's Genesis. Bereshit chapter 6. Bereshit chapter 6. And the word says, and it came to be when men began to increase on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born to them, that the sons of Elohim, these are the angels, saw the daughters of men, and they were good. And they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And Yahweh said my spirit shall not strive with man forever. It is going astray. He is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. Yah says, my spirit shall not, what? Strive with man because of his sin. But his days shall be 120 years. Now, scholars and others, theologians, have come mostly to believe that this is the probation time that Yah had given to man. And some have concluded that Noah preached for 120 years. That's how they taught us. But we have a duty to ourselves to show ourselves approved unto Yah and to get into his word and understand it for ourselves. So most people that I knew say that it was 120 years that Noah preached, and that's the probation time that Yah had given to them. Now, if you turn with me also to the book, the same book, Genesis, and we go to chapter 11, and we will begin at verse 10. The word here says, this is the genealogy of Shem. Shem, as you know, was the son of Noah, meaning that he would have been the 9th Melchizedek, Noah himself being the 8th that Peter spoke to us about. And so this Shem here is the very Melchizedek that Abraham met in chapter 14 of Genesis. It says here, this is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and brought forth Arpachshad 2 years after the flood. And after he brought forth Arpachshad, Shem lived 500 years and brought forth sons and daughters. He brought forth sons and daughters. And as we go through, the point that I really want to make, as you read the genealogy here, you see that all the people here in chapter 11, they all lived more than 120 years. So then you know that the 120 years that we have been taught that this is the time that was given to man is not cogent to the text. It's not cogent at all, because way after the flood, Abraham himself lived 175 years. And so we see that this 120 is not dealing with man's probation on the earth, and yet it is, and we'll show you why. We see that. So what then did Yah mean when he said that my spirit will not dwell with man because his days is 120 years? What is he saying to us? And how can we understand? How can we decipher? How can we plumb the depths of what Yah is saying to us? Because often when Yah speaks to us, his words are often ineffable and inexpressible. We can't find words to express the depth of what he's saying to us. And so therefore, we want to look at the perspicuity this morning of what Yah is saying to us. Because too often we read the scriptures only tacitly. we tinker with the word rather than delving into them, plumbing them, mining the word, and let them leap off the pages into our understanding. That's what we want to do this morning. So, what did he mean? Now, the first thing that we need to understand is what Peter the apostle wants us to know. Peter says in 2 Peter, come with me to 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 8. Peter says, be not ignorant of this one thing. Don't overlook this. In your reading, in your studying, don't miss this point. That's what Peter wants you to know. He says, the one fact is this, beloved, that with Yah, one day is 1,000 years. What is Peter saying? Peter is saying, on earth, we deal with a 24-hour day. But in the realm to which he refers us, which is in heaven, one day is equal to 1,000 years. That's what he's saying. So in creation, when Yah made man, he said, I've given man 6 days. And on the seventh day, that man must rest. So if we take what Peter is saying, that's 6,000 years. That's the probation. So the probation of man is 6,000 years. And so Yah, being the great mathematician that he is, this is what he did. He said, every cycle of 7 days, I want to meet with you. We call that the Shabbat. Every cycle of 7 days, I would like to meet with you. That's my family. That's what he said. But he says thereafter, you then count 7 years, which is the Shemitah years. And so whenever you have 7 times 7 years, that's 49, had 150. And so the 50th year is the Jubilee. The Jubilee year is when sins and things are forgiven from a prophetic point of view. But in ancient Israel, the Jubilee is when the slaves were set free and debt were paid or repaid. That's what happened in the Jubilee. So if you now multiply that 50 by 120, what do you get? 50 times 120. Help me. I know what we're supposed to get. Say it. 6,000. We want to be interactive here. We should speak. So the point I'm making, the 120 years that we read earlier in Genesis chapter 6 and verse 3, when it's multiplied by 50 jubilees, we get the 6,000. So Yah said, I have given man 6,000 years divided into the sums of jubilees. And so many of you will recollect that in 1967, which was said to be the 119th Jubilee, mean we only had at that point one Jubilee left for the rest of the world before Yeshua comes. Now, the 6-day war in Israel was the sign given. Notice it was 6 days. And then there was peace, there was cease, a kind of a Sabbath. So the 120th Jubilee, if you count 50 years from 1967, you come to 2017. Hear me? Which was the year that we talked about last week when we had this great eclipse in America on the 21st of August. Hear me? And therefore, we are told that 7 years from that time, the 8th of April, another eclipse, solar eclipse, may I add, is coming to America, and it put a hex, a gigantic X, right there across America over the zone of the earthquake region at a place called Little Egypt. That's interesting. Little Egypt. And interesting, in the same Illinois state, we have a place called Loamy in Springfield. And so, as we discussed last week, the X that Yah is putting across America, it is the sign of the Aleph. So when we read Revelation 7, and he says, I am the Alpha and Omega, that's Greek. In the Hebrew, he's saying, I am the Aleph and the Tav. That's the sign he's putting over America. We need to understand that. And so, what's my point? Is that if this is correct, that man has been given 6,000 years, and the 120th Jubilee started in 2017, it means that we have one final week left before Yeshua puts in his appearance. And so something has to happen before he comes. Peter says 1,000 years is one day when you're dealing with Yah. And as we read Psalm 90, verse 10, we are told that our years are what? 70 years and 10. And by reason of strength, we may get 80. So when we contrast that and put that against, juxtapose that against what we read earlier in Genesis chapter 6, we see that, again, it's not cogent with the text. Moses is writing here in the psalm, and he's saying, our years are 70 and 10, and by reason of strength, 80. But in Genesis, we have presumed that the 120 is what was being spoken about to Noah about the probation of man. No, he's talking about the days that have been given to man. Now, so if the probation or the 120th Jubilee started in 2017, we're in 2024. And he did say he will cut the time short for righteousness' sake. So man doesn't have as much as he thinks he has. He doesn't have that. And all the planning and things that men are doing, it is an act of futility. They're acts of futility. People thinking that this prime minister or that president is going to make the difference. No, 1,000 times no. So what does Yah say? Yah said, I must do something because I have some people down there, and I'm going to unleash my wrath on the earth. And I believe America is preeminent among those who will get it. And I see why he has put this X, this gigantic X, on the 8th of April, 2024. Remember, on the 8th of April, that is the new moon. And so we're made to understand that the moon will come between the sun and the earth and block the rays. Now, the majority of people watching this with their binoculars and other things, they won't even have a clue what's happening. They don't even understand that it's the new moon. It's the start of the new month. But Yah is about to unleash unmitigated, undiluted, unexpurgated wrath upon the earth. And therefore, he wants you to know and I to know, because 2 weeks from the 8th of March is going to be the Passover. Just like in Egypt, when the angel of death came past, and if you did not have the blood on the lintels of your door, you would die. This morning in Sabbath school, we talked about the blood of Yeshua. This time it's not on the door, it's on your heart. That's what we're dealing with. Because in Jeremiah chapter 16 and verse 14, Yah says that the exodus from Egypt to the promised land was really secondary to what the second exodus is going to be. He says no longer will they talk about the exodus from Egypt to the promised land, but this new exodus, this spiritual exodus, where people are coming together and understanding who they are. Many of the people today who initially thought that they were Gentile are coming to the understanding that they are now Hebrew people. That's the kind of exodus, a spiritual exodus, an understanding of who you are. And to consolidate that point, come with me to the book of Deuteronomy. And we will look at Deuteronomy chapter 30. And we will look at let's do 28, chapter 28. And read a few verses there. The word says in Deuteronomy chapter 28 that let's try verse 68. And Yah shall bring thee into Egypt again. Egypt really here is talking about bondage, not the literal Egypt. He shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Now, who is this talking about? Which other group of people came to the Americas and to Britain and elsewhere to Brazil as bondmen and bondwomen and were brought back into bondage? Deuteronomy is talking about Hakin. We've got to understand that, how we moved away from Yah, and so slavery was a condition of our faithlessness. It was a chastising of us. Now understand, in Isaiah, Yah says he's going to use the Assyrian as a chastising rod. Of course, you will recall that it was Assyria who took away the 10 tribes of Israel in 722 BC and took them, and they never came back home. Thereafter, the land was called the land of Yehudi, or the land of Judah. So he's about now to round up, to regather the people. This is the second Exodus. And I hear the troubadour from Trenchtown, did he not sing Exodus, movement of Yah's people? He understood that, I believe. But we are not understanding. There is an exodus. This is why throughout the world today, whether it be America, whether it's Britain, whether it's Ghana, wherever, people are talking about immigration. They're talking about it. But they're not understanding that it is a prophetic movement that is taking place and playing out in politics and in economics. They're not getting that. But it's here in the word. So what does Yah have to do? He says, because I'm about to close out all things. Last week we talked about the sevens, how they're coming together. When Mr. Trump became president, he was 70 years, 7 months, and 7 days old. We said that. We also said that his first day in office was on the 7th day of the week, which is the Shabbat. We also said his first speech lasted 77 minutes. We also said that he beat Hillary Clinton by way of the electoral votes, electoral college vote, 77. So you could see all the sevens coming together. Why? Because Yah is about to close out a system and bring in a new one. That's what we're dealing with. And so, we must not presume anything, because what we're watching is the playing out of Yah's injunction. That's our topic today. So Yah says, in light of what's going on, I must round up my people. So what does the people need to do? So come with me to Chizayon, chapter 7, verses 1 to 3. Chizayon. That's Revelation. A word here says, and after these things I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding back the winds of the earth. Now, winds in the scriptures means strife, war, commotion. That's what it means. So he's telling you that what is about to come up on the earth is such that he needs to take care of his own. Let's read it again for emphasis. And after these things, I saw 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, or on the tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living Yah. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given not to hurt. Well, let's read it again. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth. Why? Neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our Yah in their foreheads. Did you get that? Think back to ancient Egypt, as we indicated earlier. Yah came to Moses in chapter 12 of Exodus, and he says, I'm changing the calendar. As from this day, as from this new moon, this will be the first month of the year, not the 7th month, because he moved the calendar from a fall calendar to a spring calendar. And he says, 14 days after that, you are going to have what? A Passover. Don't miss where I'm going with this. On the 8th of April, 2024, it will be the start of the new year. Are you with me? And He says 14 days after this, you're going to have a Passover, just like in Egypt. But in order to prepare yourself for the Passover, because the destroying angel is coming, make sure you have the blood over the lintels of your door. We are years removed from Egypt, but we see the same situation playing itself out in America and across the world. We see it here. So he's saying that I must seal my people. What's the seal? Let's go back to that. We spoke last week and we said the sign of the seal is the Aleph sign. When you do the Hebrew alphabet, it's the Aleph, isn't it? That starts the alphabet. And what's the next? Aleph, Bet, what else? Gimel, Dalet, A, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud. So Kaf, we could go on, but the point is, this sign is what he wants to put on you. So when the destroying angel comes, be it America, Britain, Brazil, South Africa, wherever, Europe, Russia, Ukraine, they will see the sign on you. It was physical in Egypt. It is spiritual in this time. We've got to understand that and don't ignore that. We just said that the 1,000 years are almost up. The 6,000 years. So the next 1,000 years when he comes is the millennium. That really is the Sabbath. 6 days I have given to man, and the 6th day, each one of those, what? Terrestrial day is equal to 1,000 celestial years. That's what Peter wants you to know. One terrestrial day, which is 24 hours, is equal to 1,000 celestial years. And they're almost up. Because if we conclude that the 128th Jubilee years started in 2017, and he's going to cut the time short in righteousness, then it doesn't surprise me greatly that he's about now to put a sign over America and say, I am the Aleph Tah. He wants to sign his people. And the place that he's doing it is in Little Egypt, where some of the slaves were. It is amazing. And notice something, the year 2017, when all this started on the Hebrew calendar, it was 5777. Now, if that doesn't mean anything to you, come back with me to the book of Bereshit. Bereshit, and we're going to go back to chapter 5 this time, and we will read from verse 31. It says, so all the days of Lamech, hear me, were 777 years. You see, just before the flood, Lamech died at 777. And I'm trying to get you to understand, can we not see the sevens coming together in play? And what we're doing, we're juxtaposing the existential reality of it with what has taken place before. That's what we're doing. So let's go over it again, just to emphasize the point. So in the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old. Did you get that? Noah was 500 years old. Did you get that? 5777 when you had Noah and Lamech together. Wow. So let's now look at um, chapter 6, as we did earlier. It says that, Noah went into the ark when? When he was what? How old was he when he went in the ark? He went into the ark. Well, let's look at chapter 7 and verse 6. Now, Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters were on the earth. So again, we are disproving that assumption. It says that he started to build the ark when? When he was 500 years old. That's when he had the three sons during that process of time. And he went into the heart where he was 600. So those people who say he preached for 120, we're still missing 20 years. Where is it? It's not there because it wasn't referring to that period of time. It was referring to the end of the earth. That's what we need to understand. So he wants to seal us in. He wants to seal us in. And so we've got to make sure that he seals us in. Now, come with me to Ezekiel chapter 9. Ezekiel chapter 9, so we can show you a mandate for this that we know took place years before. Ezekiel chapter 9, and it reads, "He cried also in mine ears with a loud voice, saying, Cause them that have charge over the city to draw near, even every man with his destroying weapon in his hand. And behold, 6 men came from the way of the high gate, which lieth towards the north, and every man a slaughtering weapon in his hand. And one man among them was clothed in linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And they went in and stood inside the brazen altar, and the glory of Yah of Israel was gone up from the cherub." Did you get that? It says his spirit at this time was leaving the assembly and went up onto the threshold, moving. In Genesis, we read that his spirit will not always dwell with man. He will remove his spirit from the earth and his wrath will come. But before his wrath come, he says, I have some people down there on earth. I must seal them in. I'm going to put the tab on them. So when the destroying angel come, the destroying angel will recognize them even as he did in Egypt. That's what we're dealing with. So we're saying, do not presume upon the injunction of Yah. The injunction is saying we must stop sinning, stop doing the things that we're doing that sends a stench to his nostril, that offends him. That's where we're at today. And then he says in verse 4, we're still in chapter 9, and Yah said unto him, the man with the linen, go through the midst of the city. Do what? Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark. What? A mark, the same Aleph mark, on the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for the abominations that are done in the midst of them. So he's saying, take note of the people who sigh and cry of the abomination. Now, what abomination? Now, we live in a society, and you will recall that on the 26th of June, 2015 it was, that the Supreme Court of America decided that it is all right for people to accept the exit as the entrance, in that, 2 men can get married and 2 women can get married. And the word of Yah says, this is an abomination. And what must we do? How do we reconcile? Can it be reconciled what Yah is saying and what the society is saying? And he's saying, if you see these things happening and you don't sigh and you don't cry about the abomination, he says you won't be sealed in. He said, you watch in the church and in the society how people are just getting rid of their husbands and their wives. One of the commandments, the seventh commandment, do not commit adultery. He's saying, if you see these things happening and you say nothing, only those who sigh and cry. We're in the same place now, and the great debate in America is about this IV treatment. You know, who is a human being? When does conception start? When does it start? When does life start? We have studied here that it takes 24 hours before that egg that is let down by the male into the womb of the woman, and then it fertilizes. When does conception start? We've studied this. And so when people indiscriminately, and they put away the unborn child, who doesn't have a voice? Who speaks? Yah speaks for the unborn. And he says these are abomination. And so therefore, he says, because you didn't sigh and you didn't cry for these abominations, when the angel of death comes, and he can't recognize you of one of his because you don't have the Aleph tab on your forehead as they did in Egypt. The question is, where will you spend your eternity? Where? And so we're dealing with the sealing. And of course, when you go to court in a situation like this, then you've got to have a burden of proof. If you make a claim, you got to have the burden of proof. You must present a preponderance of evidence to the judge to say that the claim that I made is true. And so we are in this situation, and you may well ask the question that many have asked. And some will say, so elder, are you saying? No, I'm not saying. I'm just letting you know what Yah says. Because when I speak of the Shabbat, and I said that Yah says when he spoke morality on Mount Sinai, he wasn't speaking to Jews alone. In fact, there were no Jews. Jews, they were Yehudis or Israelites. He said, this law is for the homeborn, and it's for those who sojourn with you. It's for everybody. And so when a person goes to an assembly that treats the seventh-day Sabbath as the first day, and they think nothing is wrong with it, and somebody say, so are you telling me that those people won't be saved? I will refer them to Matthew 7:22. Let's go there. Because Yeshua said, many will come on that day and say to me, sovereign, Yah, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we do this in your name? He says, I will say to them, I never knew you. That's what Matthew 7:22 is saying. I never knew you. But we were in church every Sabbath or every Sunday. I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers. That's what he's saying. So let's not kid ourselves that we're saved when we are only making allegations of faith. Presumptions of faith. So we're looking at the presumption of causation. What caused you to think that? That you're saved when you're not doing what Yah says? It's a fallacy, is it not? It is a fallacy. So let us understand one thing, that when Adam died, you recall? No, you wouldn't recall because you weren't there. But we read in the scriptures that Adam died at 930 years. Isn't that what we've read? He died at the age of 930. You know what? Let's go to Genesis. Let the word speak to us. Genesis 5. Bereshit chapter 5. Let's go there. The word says, this is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that Yah created mankind, in the likeness of Yah made he him. Adam was created in the likeness of Yah. Understand that. Male and female. So man is plural. Man is plural. Created he them and blessed them and called their name. Did you get that? He called their name Adam. Two people in one man. Because in Adam, all our seeds are in his loins. So Adam represents mankind. He's the federal head of the family. And he blessed them and called their name Adam. Notice, he didn't say their names, their name, singular. Adam, in the day when they were created. And Adam lived 130 years. There it is. I didn't just want to pass it. I want you to see it for yourself. He lived 130 years and begat a son in his own likeness. Did you get that? He said, after Adam sinned, sin became a genetic transmission whereby Adam could not produce holy and righteous people as Yah, as he was created by Yah. He could only produce those like himself. That's what he says. He produced a son in his own likeness after his image and called his name Seth. And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Adam lived were 930 years. Then he died. Understand why I cite that. Because we read earlier in Psalm 19, verse 10, that our years are 80 years and 10. Way back, Yah told Adam, the day you eat of that fruit, you shall surely die. And so people end up in all kind of debate and ask the question, did Adam die on the day that he ate the fruit? And some will tell you no, but I will tell you, yes, he died. Because one day is equal to 1,000 years, and Adam lived 930 years. He was 70 years short of 1,000 years. No man has ever lived a day in Yah's creation. Not one man. Methuselah lived 969 years. Not one single man has ever lived a day. So Adam died in the day that he ate the fruit. And therefore, we go back to that issue of presumption. Don't assume, don't presume on Yah's injunction. When he told Adam, you will die in the day, Adam lived 930 years. But, you know, if you were a cynical person, you would say, you know, if Adam had lived a little bit longer, then our lifespan would be even shorter. He only left us 70 years, which is what Moses is dealing with in chapter 90 of the Psalm. So we've got to understand what is going on. Let's come to 2 Peter this time, and we'll look at 3 to 5. Knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers. Who? Scoffers, of course. And what the scoffers will say? They're walking after their own lust, they're saying, where is the promise of his coming? Where? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willingly are ignorant. Did you hear that? Peter said, when people say, and people have said, well, ever since I was a boy, someone told me that Christ is coming and he hasn't come, and they considered it as a fable. Peter said they're ignorant of the scriptures. They're scoffers. Because Yah never said he was coming before he's due to come. He said, I have scheduled my coming at the end of 6,000 years. So Peter says they are willingly ignorant. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the way of Yah the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. They're ignorant. So when they ask you that, trying to force you into a question, thinking they have you beat, yes, they're ignorant. Jude, let's go to Jude. That's the penultimate book of the Bible, the one before Revelation. And we will read verse 17 and 19. But you, beloved, who? You, beloved, remember the words which were spoken before by the apostles of our Master Yeshua, Messiah. How they told you that there would be mockers in the last day. How many? Mockers. So we have Jude here talking about mockers. We have Peter telling you about the mockers. He said they will come in the last days, right? Mocking and would walk according to their own ungodly lust, their own unrighteous lust, thinking that they have you beat. Now in Numbers 14:34 we read, and after the number of days in which we search the land, even 40 days, each day is a year. So we see that again in Numbers 34. In Numbers 14:34, we're dealing with the year-day principle. We've got to understand that. So I am bringing to your attention the proof, the burden of proof has been on me this morning to show you that the 120 years that is mentioned in Genesis 6 is not dealing with the probation of man in that time, but it's dealing with the probation of man to the end of the earth. So that's 120 times 50 Jubilee, and now we're in the 120th Jubilee, and Yah is about to put in an appearance, and the world is confused. That's why the word says Babylon is falling. The churches that are supposed to teach the people are not doing so because the light. Let's come to Revelation chapter 18. Revelation chapter 18. And the word here says that, well, let's go to 14 to put this thing in context. Let's contextualize the whole thing. The word says in verse 6 of the said chapter 14, it says, and I saw another angel fly in mid-heaven, having the everlasting good news to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. How many people must hear it? Everybody. All right? Saying with a loud voice, fear Yah and keep his commandments, give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Not coming, has come. It's come. So the first thing you do, fear him. How do you fear him? He says, if you love me, you keep my commandment. You are obedient to him if you fear him. When you don't fear him, you're saying, I won't do what he says and I'll treat him with contempt. You are prodigiously impudent. That's what you are when you don't keep his commandments. And the next one saying, another angel, this is verse 7, fear Yah and give glory to him, for the hour of his the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made the heavens and the earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen. Not physical Babylon, because Babylon is no longer a place. Babylon is a lifestyle. Did you get that? And we spoke about that earlier, how people are conducting themselves in the world. That's the kind of confusion that exists. And the third angel followed, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image and receive his mark. Notice Satan is also marking people. This is why Yah wants to seal us in first, so that Satan's mark will not have any impact on us. You've got to understand that. Because he says, if you get Satan's mark, he says, the same shall drink of the wine of my wrath. This is what we're talking about. That's coming. His wrath is coming. And so we go now to Revelation chapter 18. And he says, and after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen. That's the same Babylon, Mr. Babylon it's called. It's fallen. It's fallen and it's become the habitations of devils. Did you get that? If you don't come out of lifestyle Babylon and come into the assembly of Yah, I'm not talking church here, I'm talking kingdom. Yeshua never established a church, he established a kingdom. All right? He said, if you don't come out, he says, you're going to receive his wrath. For all nation, how many nation? All nation have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the great kings of the earth have been what? Committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. Listen to verse 4. Come out. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not her plagues. Did you hear that? He's saying, all right, and he's replaying for us what took place in Egypt and the Passover. It was a new moon that he changed the calendar. Fast forward several years, we're now in America, the place where many slaves died. They were whipped. They were dragged behind pickup trucks. They couldn't drink at the same faucets as certain other people. They were not allowed to be trained to read and write. It was illegal. Are you following me? They had laws they call, what do they call them? Jim Crow. They had those kind of laws. You couldn't go in the same hotel at a particular time like other folk. Our people were the other Americans. They weren't like the others. And so, yeah, he says, on April the 8th, I'm going to reenact what I did in Israel. It is the new moon. And 14 days after that, Passover. I'm saying to those who are listening, let this be your first Passover. It might be your last. Are you with me? Because when he puts that gigantic X over America, the sign Aleph Tav, it's the sign of the ceiling for some. But for others, just like in Egypt, it's wrath. And what's interesting, this is over the area where it's an earthquake zone at Little Egypt. I mean, that ain't a coincidence, is it? So he speaks now to the churches. Listen to him. Come with me to the same passage, Revelation 18, and we're going to look at verses 22 and 23. And the voice of the harpers and the musicians and of the pipers and the trumpeters shall be heard no more. You didn't hear me, let me step back because you may have missed that subtle point. And we need to look at the nuances of the text so we can contextualize what we're saying. When the previous president came into office, and by virtue of his name, I said then, this is the last Trump. I'm dealing with the nuances now. Before him, who was it? It was Obama. And I said then, the word says, when you see this abomination, did you get me? When you see this abomination, nuances, and then Trump comes. Before the previous Trump was Bush. And I liken that to when Moses met, at the burning bush. So even the names of the last three presidents, the inference of which can be drawn is that they revert back to the experience of the Israelites. And that's my point. So let's go now to verse 23. And the light of the candle shall shine no more at all in thee. We read in Revelation 1 that the candlesticks represents the church, the seven churches. Now we're in the last candlestick called Laodicea, the last candlestick. And he's letting us know it will go out. And the voice of the bridegroom, we know Yeshua is the bridegroom, and of the bride shall be heard no more. Did you get that? He's saying some of these assemblies, you will not hear the voice of Yah. He's not there. He has walked out, just as he did back then in Matthew 23 and 38 and Luke 13:35. He said, behold, your house is left to you desolate, closed. And you can recall that these churches were closed during the period of what they call the pandemic. They were closed. Who closed them? Not Yah, but the government. He says, you will not hear the voice of Yah. Why? He said, the merchants were the great men at this time in the earth. For by their sorceries were all the nations deceived. And we have studied here that sorcery here, the Greek word is pharmakia, drugs. That's what they're dealing with. He said, when you see this happening, you know when the churches are closed, this is it. And in verse 4, he says, come out. Come out of her, my people. Be not partaker. He has now come to seal those who saw the abomination, who sighed and cried. Not those who remained. Those are Pharaoh's children. We've got to understand the prophetic playing out of all this. We've got to understand that. And so, the thing is this: if you are not with Yeshua, then you're in trouble. You're in trouble. You're really in trouble. We've got to understand that. And so he's saying, I'm coming and my rewards are with me. I'm coming. Come. Moses, go and tell Pharaoh now to let my people go. My duty is to let the people know. And Pharaoh hardened his heart. But Yah had to send these signs, these 10 plagues, to emphasize, to introduce himself. Why was he doing that? Why does Yah need to introduce himself to Pharaoh? Because when Moses went to him, he said, I knew not your Yah. Because Yah's name was not on the list of Yahs in Pharaoh's time. So he said, I'll introduce myself to him by way of a bloody Nile, of darkness, of droughts, death of the firstborn. I'll introduce myself, and he will relent. He will relent. My question this morning, if what we're saying is cogent with the text of the word here, that we are now in the 120th Jubilee of the end of time, that all that we have ever read and told is about to come to an end. And that he's going to cut this thing in short. And the time of Jacob's trouble is upon us. Brother against brother, sister against sister, family against family. That's what he said. That was the time of Jacob's trouble, was when Jacob was having problem with Esau and had to run away. That's happening right now when we see it playing out in the society. If that's true, and Yeshua is coming soon, and your soul is not in safekeeping, it's appropriate that I ask you, where will you spend eternity? Where? Because he tells us that all that we have worked hard for and put away, it will be of no use. The word says that Lot went down with Abraham, but he had so much wealth that he couldn't live with Abraham anymore. So he went down to Sodom because his wealth was so great. But the same word tells us that when he was coming out, we didn't see him with a suitcase, did we? He was told by the angel, run for your life. But I speak to those who have the same mentality. Shall we call them Mrs. Lot? She had so much wealth down in Sodom, she looked back, and the word says she became sodium chloride, a pillar of salt. Listen to what James says, and we'll close on this. James chapter 5. James is really Jacob. James chapter 5. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your misery that shall come upon you. It's coming? Oh, yes, it's coming. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is conquered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh, as it were fire, he have heaped treasures together for the last days. Did you get that? It says, it is interesting as you read this because you have people now investing in gold all over the world because gold is a precious metal. And if you know anything about chemistry, gold doesn't rust. But here said it will become conquered. It will rust in the last days. Because he's letting you know all that you have put your heart in is futility. And that's why the wise man Solomon says, wealth, I had it all. Women, oh, I had it. Songs, he said, I did 1,005 parables and 300 poems. 3,000, I should say. But now he says in Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13, he says, there was nobody in Jerusalem like me. In the world, all the kings come to me for counsel. He said, education, I was above them all. Girls, oh, I had them. He says, I use silver like stones. The cups, the mugs that I drink from, they were gold. And I mean 24 karat from the land of Ophir. We won't go into that, but he says it was gold. He says, let me tell you now the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear Yah and keep his commandments. Isn't that what he said? That is the whole duty of man. So should any of us forget the purpose for which we were born, let's go back and read Ecclesiastes 12 and verse 13. Or even 12. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth. Because when you get old, and you start losing the air, and you don't have as many teeth as you once did, and your knees starts to applaud you because you're getting weak. You shall say, I have no pleasure in them. What if you get to that age and you're not saved? And Yah puts in his appearance. He told Jerusalem, he says, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I wish I could put you under my wings as a hen, chicks. But you did not know the day of your visitation. What if the 8th of April, 2024, or 2 weeks from there on, is a profound sign for us not to miss? The Aleph tab that is going to be put over America is warning us to get our lives in order. What if? And therefore, the king himself wants you to know this through the other king, David, the shepherd king. Psalm 34 through 11 to 14. You know it well. Come, ye children, hearken unto me. I will teach you the fear of Yah. What man is he that desireth life and loveth many days that he may see? Keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking vile. Depart from evil, do good, seek peace, and pursue it. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.